Chapter 6 of Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two she stood looking at the house and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery. Otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish, and rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery, with a round face and large eyes like a frog, and both footmen, Alice noticed, had powdered hair that curled all over their heads. She felt very curious to know what it was all about, and crept a little way out of the wood to listen. The fish footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter, nearly half as large as himself, and this he handed over to the other, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman repeated in the same solemn tone, only changing the order of the words a little, "from the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet." They both bowed low, and their curls got entangled together. Alice laughed so much at this that she had to run back into the wood for fear of their hearing her, and when she next peeped out, the fish footman was gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up at the sky. That would be a good scene to draw in your reading notebook. And you can see I titled it Chapter 6, Pig and Pepper. And you could draw the two guys, the two men, and handing each other the letters. Their invitations from the Queen, or invitation from the Duchess to play croquet. Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked. "There's no sort of use in knocking," said the footman, "and that for two reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are." It's kind of a funny vision, isn't it? Usually if somebody knocks on a door, you would expect someone to be knocking on this side. If they're outside, maybe it's Alice, right? They're knocking to get somebody's attention on the other side of the door. But you wouldn't knock on this side of the door to try to get somebody's attention on the same side of the door. That is very silly. This chapter has a lot of silly stuff in it. I guess the whole book does, but... And secondly, because they're making such loud noise inside that no one could possibly hear you. And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on, within a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash, as if a dish or a kettle had been broken into pieces. "Please then," said Alice, "how am I to get in?" "There might be some sense in knocking," the footman went on without attending to her, "if we had a door between us. For instance, if you were inside, you might knock, and I could let you out, you know." He was looking up at the sky all the time he was speaking, and this Alice thought decidedly uncivil. "Perhaps he can't help it," she said to herself. "His eyes are so very nearly at the top of his head. But at any rate, he might answer questions." "How am I to get in?" she repeated aloud. "I shall sit here," the footman remarked, "until tomorrow." At this moment the door of the house opened, and a large plate came skimming out, straight at the footman's head. It just grazed his nose, and broke to pieces against one of the trees behind him. "Or next day, maybe," the footman continued in the same tone, exactly as if nothing had happened. "How am I to get in?" asked Alice again in a louder tone. "Are you to get in at all?" said the footman. "That's the first question, you know." It was, no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so. "It's really dreadful," she muttered to herself, "all the creatures argue. It's enough to drive one crazy." The footman seemed to think this a good opportunity for repeating his remark with variations. "I shall sit here," he said, "on and off for days and days." "But what am I to do?" said Alice. "Anything you like," the footman said, and began whistling. "Oh, there's no use talking to him," said Alice desperately. "He's perfectly idiotic." She opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron, which seemed to be full of soup. This would be a great picture to draw, too, because it's so full of detail. There are several characters, and they're all doing something different. There's certainly too much pepper in that soup, Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately, without a moment's pause. The only things in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and the large cat, which was sitting on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. "Please would you tell me," said Alice, a little timidly, for she was not quite sure whether it was good manners for her to speak first, "why your cat grins like that?" It's a Cheshire cat," said the Duchess. "That's why." So, if you've seen a picture of the Cheshire cat before, he's got this grin on his face. We call it a grin. It's like a relaxed sort of a grin. And, again, drawing's not my specialty, so I'm just going to do that. And the cat will look like he has something in his mouth. Anyway, and he kind of wags his tail like he's up to something. This is the Cheshire cat. So, and let's label him Cheshire cat. You may have heard the term before, Cheshire cat. He's got a Cheshire cat grin, right? That means somebody's grinning like they're up to something. They're smiling like something is going on. There's more here to the story. And I feel like I need to make him smile, but that's not really the Cheshire cat grin, but that's the best I can do. So, and that's where it says, it's a Cheshire cat, said the Duchess. And that's why. Pig! She said the last word with sudden violence that Alice quite jumped. But she saw in another moment that it was addressed to the baby and not to her, so she took courage and went on again. "I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin." "They all can," said the Duchess, "and most of them do." "I don't know of any that do," Alice said very politely, feeling quite pleased to have gotten into a conversation. "You don't know much," said the Duchess, "and that's a fact." Alice did not like the tone of this remark, and thought it would be well to introduce some other subject of conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire, and at once set to work on throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. The fire irons came first, then followed a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes. The Duchess took no notice of them, even when they hit her, and the baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not. "Oh, please mind what you are doing," cried Alice, jumping up and down in agony of terror. Oh, there goes this precious nose!" as an unusually large saucepan flew close by it, and very nearly carried it off. "If everybody minded their own business," the Duchess said in a hoarse growl, "the world would go round a deal faster than it does." "Which would not be an advantage," said Alice, who felt very glad to get an opportunity of showing off a little of her knowledge. "Just think of what it would make with the day and night. Let's try this again. Just think of what work it would make with the day and night. You see, the Earth takes 24 hours to turn on its axis." "Talking of axes," the Duchess said, "chop off her head." This is actually one of my favorite lines. So, let's explain here. We've got Alice, right? This little girl who, she knows everything, like a little kid does. And then she has, the adults in the story are telling her, like, stop knocking, or, in this case, please mind what you're doing. Right? Please mind what you're doing. The Duchess, there we go, took no notice of them, even when they hit her, and the baby was howling so much already. So, if everybody minded their own business, the Duchess said in a hoarse growl, the world would go round a deal faster. So the Duchess is really trying to be bossy, right? And be in control. But Alice stands right up to the Duchess, even though Alice is just little. She said, "That's not an advantage. Just think of what it would make with the day and the night. You see, the Earth takes 24 hours to turn around on its axis." You know, when Alice says axis, she's talking about the world, right, on its axis, rotating. This axis means some sort of rotation. And instead, the Duchess says, talking of axes, axes, right, the Duchess means like axes. And she says, chop off her head. So this is what the Duchess is saying. Talking of axes, chop off her head. Chop off her head. You've heard the saying, I'm sure. Off with your head. I want to say off with her head. That's a pretty powerful thing to order somebody's off with their head. But it's a very famous kind of, saying. So it's a good one to have in mind, a good one to use even. I mean, not really use, but it's a good one to have access to, like for your writings, that sort of thing. Alright. So it says, chop off her head. Alice glanced rather anxiously at the clock to see if she meant to take the hint, but the cook was busily stirring the soup, and seemed not to be listening. So she went on again. 24 hours, I think, or is it 12? Oh, don't bother me. Here we go. Oh, don't bother me, said the Duchess. I never could do figures. I never could abide figures. And with that, she began nursing her child again, singing a sort of lullaby as she did so, and giving it a violent shake at the end of every line. Speak roughly to your little boy, and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy, because he knows it teases. In which the cook and the baby joined, after the chorus. Wow, wow, wow. When the Duchess sang the second verse of the song, she kept tossing the baby violently up and down, and the poor little thing howled so that Alice could hardly hear the words. I speak severely to my boy, I beat him when he sneezes, for he can thoroughly enjoy the pepper when he pleases. The chorus, wow, wow, wow. Here, you may nurse it a bit if you like, the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby at her as she spoke. I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen, she said hurriedly. She hurried out of the room. Cook threw the frying pan after her as she went out, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature, and held out its arms and legs in all directions. Just like a starfish, thought Alice. The poor thing was snorting like a steam engine when she caught it, and kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, and so altogether for the first minute or two it was as much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she had made out the proper way of nursing it, which was to twist it up into a sort of knot, and then keep tight hold of its right ear and left foot so as to prevent it from undoing itself, she carried it out to the open air. If I don't take this child away with me, thought Alice, they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave it behind? She said the last words out loud, and the little thing grunted in reply. It had left off sneezing by this time. Don't grunt, said Alice. That's not at all a proper way of expressing yourself. The baby grunted again, and Alice looked anxiously into its face, to see what was the matter with it. There could be no doubt that it had a very turn-up nose, which was more like a snout than a real nose. Also, its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby, although altogether Alice did not like the look of the thing at all, but perhaps it was only sobbing, she thought. She looked into its eyes to see if there were any tears. No, there were no tears. If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear, said Alice seriously, I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now. The poor little thing sobbed again, or grunted, which was impossible to say which, and then went on for some while in silence. Alice was just beginning to think to herself, now what am I to do with this creature when I get it home? When it grunted again so violently that she looked down into its face in some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig. and she felt that it would be quite absurd for her to carry it further. So she set the little creature down, and felt quite relieved to see it trot away quietly into the wood. If it had grown up, she said to herself, it would have made a dreadfully ugly child, but it makes a rather handsome pig, I think. She began thinking over other children she knew who might do well as pigs, and was just saying to herself, if one only knew the right way to change them, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought to be treated with respect. Cheshire Puss, she began timidly, as she did not at all know whether it would like the name. However, it only grinned a little wider. Come, it's please so far, thought Alice. And when she went on, would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. That is good advice. If you don't care where you go, then I guess it doesn't matter which way you choose. Most of us usually care, at least some way, which way we go. So long as I get somewhere, Alice added as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if only you walk long enough. Alice felt that this could not be denied, so she tried another question. What sort of people live about here? In that direction, the cat said, waving his right paw round, lives a hatter. And in that direction, waving the other paw, lives a March Hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad. But I don't want to go among mad people, Alice remarked. We can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. How do I know I'm mad, said Alice. You must be, said the cat, or you wouldn't have come here. This is also just kind of a funny thing. Everybody in that place is mad, and Alice wants to know how they would know she was mad. How should she know she's mad? Well, she must be mad if she's there. That's the criteria, being there. Alice didn't think that proved it at all, however. She went on. And how do you know that you're mad? To begin with, said the cat, a dog's not mad. You grant that? I suppose so, said Alice. Well then, the cat went on, you see, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased, and I wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore, I'm mad. I call it purring, not growling, said Alice. Call it what you like, said the cat. Do you play croquet with the Queen today? I should like it very much, said Alice, but I haven't been invited yet. You'll see me there, said the cat, and vanished. Alice was not much surprised at this. She was getting so used to queer things happening. While she was looking at the place where it happened, it suddenly appeared again. By the by, what became of the baby? Said the cat. I nearly forgot to ask. It turned into a pig, Alice said quietly, as if it had just come back in a natural way. I thought it would, said the cat, and vanished again. Alice waited a little, half expecting to see it again, but it did not appear. After a minute or two, she walked on in the direction in which the March Hare was said to live. I've seen hatters before, she said to herself. The March Hare will be much more interesting, and perhaps this is May. It won't be raving mad, at least not so mad as it was in March. And she said this. As she said this, she looked up. And there was the cat again, sitting on the branch of a tree. Did you say pig or fig? Said the cat. I said pig, replied Alice. I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You make one quite giddy. All right, said the cat, and this time it vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of the tail, ending with the grin, which remained some time after the rest of it had gone. Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, thought Alice, but a grin without a cat? It's the most curious thing I ever saw in my life. She had not gone much farther before she came in sight of the house of the March Hare. She thought it must be the right house, because the chimneys were shaped like ears, and the roof was thatched with fur. It was so large a house that she did not like to go near it until she had nibbled some more of the left-hand bit of mushroom, and raised herself to about 2 feet high. Even then she walked up toward it rather timidly, saying to herself, "Suppose it should be raving mad after all. I almost wish I had gone to see the Hatter instead." Now, this description of the house might be a good place to start for Chapter 7. See, it says the chimneys were shaped like ears. There was a roof, was thatched with fur, and it's such a large house. So I'm guessing when we start Chapter 7, which will be coming up next, and we may learn more about the house. We may not, but that's sort of a little insight into the next chapter. And Chapter 7 is called A Mad Tea Party, and she's gone to see the Mad Hatter. So, I know, the March Hare. She didn't go to see the Mad Hatter. She went to see the March Hare. But my guess is there's probably a relationship between these two. Again, maybe not, but we have to wait and see for Chapter 7. Alright, and this is the end of Chapter 6.